What is resilience? People talk a lot about resilience. I know when COVID first hit, I had people calling me up saying, Giles, can you come and talk to our company? Can you come and talk to us about individuals, about being more resilient because we're struggling? And I probably lost myself a lot of paid jobs because I said, actually, you can't make yourself more resilient. But like, no, but there's a podcast and there's a book. And I said, bullshit. Resilience is life's gift for difficult times. Resilience is life's gift for suffering. And what is that gift? Well, resilience is when the elasticity of our mind is stretched. And in fact, we've all been doing that since we were kids. Every difficult heartbreak, every rejection, every difficult day stretches our mind and builds a resilience. It's like an athlete in training for the Olympics. What you go through is the journey. The training of an athlete getting up at 4 a.m, going running when it's raining and they don't want to go on Christmas Day, but they train every day. The reward comes at the end. And I believe that's what resilience is. A lot of us don't even see it in ourselves. I've been doing training with a lot of groups recently saying, understand your resilience. Go back a year, go back 5 years, and think about who you were and what you struggled with then, and understand the gift that you have in yourself in resilience. And what is the other part of resilience? I think it's the ability to enjoy life more than anyone. The people that I document, the people that I work with, we sit, we laugh. And that's the gift of having gone through those difficult times and the resilience we get. And that's what connects me with Land for Women. I'm going to tell you a story about my friend Olive. Now, I was in Rwanda 5-6 years ago, doing a story on genocide survivors. And I've been introduced to various people across the country. And one day I met Olive. And when I turned up, it was kind of a normal thing. We got an NGO, you're introduced, and she told me her story. And it was a very powerful story, but I felt it wasn't. I would say there's a difference between a narrative and a story. Sometimes people would tell you the narrative, i.e. this happened, this happened, this happened, but it's not really their story. I have a rule that I won't photograph anyone if I haven't eaten with them first. So I didn't make any photographs that day, and I said, can I come back tomorrow and we'll cook? And it turned out it was her birthday the next day. And she'd actually never celebrated her birthday. So the next day I turned up with a cake, and we sat and we cooked together. She was amazed that I could try and cook, and she was making fun of me because I wasn't doing that well that day. And we cooked together and we ate. And then at the end of the day, she said, I'll tell you my story now. And she's always asked me to share this story. So everything I tell you, she has blessed. And actually, even just last week, I was messaging her about this event. She was like, always wants me to share her story. So Olive was 22 when the genocide in Rwanda began. She'd actually gone to hospital to give birth to her third child. She was there. She is Tutsi. Her best friend, Clementine, is Hutu. As she was in hospital, going through labor, on the radio came the story of the president's assassination, which was the beginning of the genocide. Within hours, there were roadblocks. The Hutu militias were hunting people down. Clementine said, I'll go back to the village, make sure everybody's okay. Obviously, Olive was there giving birth. As she was giving birth to her third child, her village was attacked. Her 2 children were killed, her husband, her parents, her uncles, her aunts. Every living member of her family was killed, massacred that night, literally as she gave birth. She was in a hospital being run by nuns. The Hutu militia turned up there, and they told the nuns, send out all the Tutsi. For 3 days, the nuns persuaded them not to, and eventually she said, or the nuns said, we cannot hold them anymore. They will come and take you. They did. They came in. They sort of sorted out who was Tutsi, and they dragged them out. And Olive made a decision. She says she regrets, but it's a very incredibly powerful decision for a mother to make. She left her baby behind because she knew the baby had no identity papers, so nobody would be able to tell if the baby was Hutu or Tutsi. So she left the baby, was dragged out, was taken to a marketplace with 2,000 people, were slaughtered that day. She was one of 3 survivors. She hid under bodies for 4 days. Eventually, she moved her way down to a river. She hid in the river for a month. She ended up with malaria. She's unable to have children again. She was virtually on death's door. She left there, and she actually ended up going to the house of her uncle and aunt. Her aunt had actually married somebody who was Hutu, and that often happened at the time. But it turned out he was actually the leader of the militia that had killed her family. He decided to hide her, and she would be in his house and watch him killing Tutsi outside the window. Eventually, the genocide ended. The area was liberated. Olive was taken to hospital. By this point, she was close to death. She spent 3 months in hospital. When she left, she moved back to her village. She said she wanted to bury her family. But when she got there, nobody knew where the bodies were. The village was burnt down. There were 6 orphans, though, 6 babies, and she decided to adopt them. She moved back to Kigali, and she ended up working, exploited in the sex work. And again, she has said she wants me to tell this story. I wouldn't say anything that she hasn't asked me to share. She says that she felt like a dustbin. She said every man that she had sex with reminded her of the killers of her family, and she deserved it. She did not realize she was suffering from PTSD and survivor guilt. She did that for the next 8 years. Eventually, an organization met her and started giving her psychological help and explained to her that she was not responsible for what had happened to her family, that she did not have to live her life like this. Now, Olive is a remarkable woman, and she decided she had to give these adopted children a new chance at life. So they moved back to the village where she was from. But when she got there, she found many of the killers of her family had been released or had amnesty. And because it was a close community, she knew everybody that was involved. And so she would walk to the market or to school, and she would see the people that had massacred her own children. She said it was eating her up inside. And this is where she made a remarkable decision. Olive decided the only way she could move forward, and more importantly, the adopted children, was if she forgave. So she would visit all the members of the militia and tell them that she forgave them. Now, forgiveness is a really interesting word. What does it mean? For her, it was about releasing herself. She said when she'd come home, though, she'd start noticing the gardens cut or the roof had been fixed. And actually the people that had been involved with the militias were now coming back and doing things. But one night, there was a knock on her door. She describes it in a beautiful way. It was raining, stormy. She opens the door, and stood in front of her was her uncle, who had been in hiding, the guy that ordered the killing of her family. She was terrified. But he looked at her and he said, "I know what you've been doing, and I want to show you where we buried your family." So 10 years after the genocide, he took her to an unmarked grave. When the government came, they dug it up and they found over 150 bodies in that grave. And in Olive's words, her forgiveness meant the whole community was finally able to lay their ghosts to rest. There's a twist in the story, or another part of the story, that about 6 years after the genocide, when she was working in Kigali, Clementine, her friend, turned up on the door. They'd lost contact. Clementine was there, and she'd actually been in hiding in DR Congo after the genocide. And she said, "I thought you'd been killed, Olive." And Clementine said, "I thought the same for you." She said, "I'm so glad we can be friends because we were never enemies." And then Clementine said, "But there was a reason I had to find you." She goes, "I have your child." And her baby that had been hidden in the hospital, Clementine had gone there thinking that Olive was dead and taken the baby and brought him up, Jonathan, as her own. And so Olive was reunited with Jonathan. So when I met Olive, I'll be honest, we got really drunk. We cooked, we drank a lot of beers, and we laughed. And I remember Olive looking at me. And she said, you know the reason we are friends? Because she says, I look in your eyes and I know you have suffered like I have suffered. We built a bond that was hard to explain. This is Olive at home. And over the years, we have become very close friends. This is one of her adopted children, who I call Trouble. She is Trouble. But we sat there one day and I said to Olive, how can I help you? And she said, well, the most important thing is to tell my story. And I said, well, that I will do. That's my job. But what else can I do to actually support you? They had a small cooperative and they were growing potatoes. But to be honest, they made no money. It was living in poverty. Olive herself has many injuries left over from the genocide. It was a struggle for her every day. And I came back and I thought, what is it that we can really do? And another word, I talk about resilience, another word is empowerment. I hear many NGOs saying, we empower women, we empower communities. I'm like, I'm a white man from South London. I don't think I can empower women in Rwanda. What I realize is empowerment has to come from yourself. I had the most amazing friends, support, doctors, physiotherapists, everything when I rebuilt my life, but nobody empowered me. I had to do that myself. They supported me and took down the barriers. And I realized that's what we had to do as an NGO. Our job was to break down the barriers that were stopping Olive and her community empowering themselves. And the two barriers were education and land ownership. So we set up Land for Women with a very simple idea that we would set up a 5-year educational program that would cover everything from banking, climate smart farming. We would buy the land and we would return it to the women so they were the land owners. And then they would empower themselves. And so that is what Land for Women is. As I say, we can talk about the details. You can find out a lot more information. But tonight I wanted you to understand why we did it, what it means to us, what that bond is. When I met Olive, she was still living in many ways under the shadow of what happened to her. She was an incredibly strong woman, but society had held her back. This photograph makes me very emotional every time I see it. And it has a story that in many ways is hard to understand. This is Jonathan. This is the child that was abandoned, that was reunited, who has actually done his degree. We helped fund it in cooperative management. The man behind him is the uncle that killed his brother and father. But you look at that and think, who has the power now? Who is the person who is celebrating life? And now Olive, who when I first met was still scared of the uncle, now laughs at him in his face. And that is the power and the resilience of somebody that has overcome a society that still threatens to hold her back because she's still taught that as a man and an uncle, she's supposed to respect this man. And I remember the last time I saw Olive, she said to me, you know, the best thing, actually I should go back a little bit. I remember once going with Olive to visit the uncle and she said, I'm going to buy him a chicken. Oh no, it was a cow even. She's like, I'm going to buy him a cow. I'm like, what are you talking about, Olive? She says, well, you've taught me about forgiveness. I said, you're not buying him a cow. She said, what about chicken? I said, no, you're not buying him a chicken. He killed your family. I know, but you know, I feel sorry for him now. But I saw that relationship change. She became a landowner. She now is our representative for all our cooperatives. And now she laughs in his face. And she says to him, who is powerful now? She goes, who is happy now? And in the past, he would come to events and overshadow everything. And she said, now invite him so he can see he has lost. And that is my relationship with Olive, my dear friend, and the reason we're here tonight, because without Olive, Land for Women would not exist. As I say, I could sit here and talk about the amazing responses we have seen to that project, how latest cooperative in Boney, within a year, The women have medical insurance for the first time. They're saving for the first time. They're growing crops and giving them out of their own choice to the community, to support the community. The amazing statistics we can show. But tonight, I just wanted to tell you from my heart a story of a friendship, a story based on shared suffering and shared resilience. And that together, me and Olive have created something, Land for Women, that I'm more proud of than anything I've done in my life. And I want to sit here with all of you to celebrate that and just to ask you to go home and share it with other people or find ways that you can support what we do. Because together, we can continue to change lives and make sure women like Olive use their resilience to empower themselves. Thank you.